friends, it's Nikki from Noodle Art. Today, I'm taking you behind the scenes to show you how I make my sassy laser cut bookmarks. These little beauties are full of personality and detail.
Once you have your project open, we're going to start with settings of the actual bookmarks. I'm using a two-tone by Trotec. This is an acrylic-based engraving plastic. My cut settings are 90, 45, and 1. My engrave is 10, 400, 2 passes, and 160 lines. When working with this material, I found that it's best to engrave your project, let the material cool down, and then cut it. I found that it tends to melt if you don't do this. So what you see me doing here is setting the output just to the engrave first, and then I'll go back and turn the output of the engrave off and turn the output of the cut on. I love this two-tone plastic for these types of projects as I don't have to go back and paint fill them. xTool is also a great resource for this two-tone plastic. Running 2 passes when you're engraving with this two-tone plastic is super important. I found when you run just 1 pass, some of that black tends to melt back into the white. By doing a second pass, you're melting off the excess black. Now all you need to do is give it a quick shake and they should all pop right out. Next, we're going to cut out the outlines of our characters. When working with acrylic, never leave your machine alone. Acrylic is highly flammable and you always want to stand and watch it. As you can see, some flashback here. Make sure to always keep your honeycomb clean as well as your tray from below. When I cut acrylic, I have 2 different settings that I run. I have settings for thin acrylic and settings for thick acrylic. Any of my thin acrylic I run at 80% power, 20 speed, and 1 pass. All of my thicker acrylic I tend to run 90% power, 15 speed, and 1 pass. Once all your frame pieces have been cut, you can carefully pick them up. Note that some of the pieces are very, very tiny in this project, so you will have to piece them back in. But what I'm doing here is using a piece of masking tape and it holds in their little eyes and noses. This is tedious, but it's worth it in the end. And your tray will catch all of the tiny little pieces. Now we're going to start working on the colors. These are going to be done piece by piece, and this is going to take a bit of time. When working with inlay pieces, you have to pay attention to your kerf. Each machine has a different kerf, so you have to figure out what your kerf is on your machine. The best way to do this is just to play around with the kerf setting. I prefer an offset of 0.05 to 0.1. depending on the look that I am going for and how small the pieces are. If the pieces are super tiny, I tend to give it a bigger kerf to allow for some material being burnt up. When I'm using acrylic, I tend to have a bunch of tiny little pieces, so don't forget to use the close-up view. This is going to help you determine where exactly you can place your project. Again, we're working with tiny pieces, so I really suggest using masking tape and then giving it a little bit of a push down, and your pieces should stick to it. If any of your pieces fall, just collect them from below and pop them into place. Now I'm using a little bit of alcohol on a piece of paper towel and cleaning off this material. I find it gets a lot of black sooty bits from the engraving, and you can use a microfiber cloth just to buff it out. Once that's done, we're going to start by popping out all of the pieces inside each of the outline. We don't need these pieces, we only need the eyes and the mouths and noses if it's applicable. I prep all of my acrylic sheets with 3M 467 MP double-sided tape, which makes it easy to glue down all of these pieces. Now we can carefully line them up and pop them onto the actual bookmark piece. For this project, I highly recommend getting a pair of tweezers that have a needle tip on them. Make sure that they're super pointy, as it's going to be easier to pop these pieces out and put them back inside. Because basically what we're doing is a puzzle. Everything is going to be inlaid inside this black frame. Now we're going to start with our colored pieces. I've found that there's two ways of peeling back the masking. You can either place it so that you can push the pieces out onto your desk, or you can pull the masking back and use it as your working space. Again, this is a very tedious project, as you're basically creating a puzzle. I found it easiest to run 2 or 3 colors at a time, come back, pop the pieces in, run a couple more colors, and then continue. I always leave the face parts till last until I can get the colored portion in. I found this is easier than pushing the face pieces in first. I get my acrylic from a variety of suppliers, from KJP hardwoods to Cone acrylics to Lind Creek, but the majority of my colors are from Lind Creek, as they have probably the largest selection available. We're a little limited in Canada to the acrylic that we can get, so it's nice to have a good supplier. If you get a piece and it's stuck and you don't want it in that area, I suggest using the needle tweezers or even a dental pick, as they have great ability to poke up the pieces. I even use some tools that you would normally use for phone repair. Now I'm just taking off the masking. This piece is a bit tedious, as you don't want to scratch your image. So you can see me using that scraper, which is another good tool from the phone accessory pack. But this is where the magic happens. Once you're done peeling back all the masking, just use a microfiber cloth to help buff out any fingerprints that it might have. Here are the finished pieces. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please give it a like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.